Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, GordoGambles, and welcome back to another full card break time. This time for some NASCAR. Back here for the third edition of the NASCAR betting and DFS show with Ryan Larkin and myself. It's going to be another one where we look to take it down. I mean, the first week it's hard to replicate that every time, hitting that plus 2,000 favorite, but or plus 2,000 to win, and it was a fun race. And you know what? Last week, not necessarily our best performance, but you know what? I don't know why I'm saying our, because I'm not the brains of this operation. I'm going to bring in the brains of the operation right here. What's going on, Ryan? Welcome back to the Plays and Fates channel. Thank you for talking some NASCAR with me. How are we doing?
I'm good, Gordo. Hanging in there, trying to get excited for this weekend. Last week going into it, I knew it'd be a difficult one to predict. So, kind of in the same boat this week, unfortunately. But at least we can lean on who will be fast and have a slight idea of who to put our focus towards. But there's still a lot of variables and unknowns to work around.
You know what, man? I usually do 10 or 9 to 10 YouTube videos a week with UFC and stuff. None of that this week. This is my sole purpose, my sole intention. This is the only really research I've done, probably the most out of all 3 weeks so far. And I'm learning. I'm picking it up. And you know what? I'm actually going to be paying close attention to it. So I'm excited to see your thoughts on it. Hopefully we can hit some big plus money numbers again, because we know I'm greedy like that, right? So you know what? I'm on a high. We had a nice little weekend UFC wise, and a nice little Monday Night Football for me as a Bills fan. So you know what? I'm ready to put all those winnings to use and capitalize some more on this NASCAR series. So shout out to everybody tuning in. Shout out to everybody listening after the fact. As always, make sure to go check out Ryan and all the stuff in the description down below. Let's pull up these odds, because that's what we're here for. We're looking for these odds. Who's going to go out there? Who's going to go for it? And as always, as I seem to be typical, let me make sure I get this going. Race winner, Denny Hamlin, plus 550 this week. As always, I'm going to ask you, do we think that is a warranted line this week, or is there somebody else that you think should be favored even more?
No, I mean, he's pretty much going to be the favorite for most of these style races on the intermediates. The Toyotas have been the fastest, and he's kind of been the most consistent in terms of outright speed and upside of the group. So he'll go into these weekends as the favorite most of the time now.
All right, I like to be a bit different, though. You know me. So who would be your you still think Denny Hamlin's going to take it home, or is there anybody else in that like top 5 range who you think may have some better chances than the line does entail?
Yeah, so the most important thing to know about this race versus what we had in Kansas, which is the one where we picked Bubba Wallace to win, is that this track is incredibly difficult to pass on. So a driver who restarts in 5th or 6th can literally just be trapped 5th or 6th with the fastest car. Mainly because the difference between the cars and overall speed isn't that much. They're very, very close in comparable speed. And then the track doesn't lend itself to actual passing. And basically what that's going to do, especially late in the race, it's going to give any driver in the field the opportunity to get out first on the last pit stop, whether it be through taking no tires or 2 tires, or just having the best pit stop. And that'll get them the lead and make them the instant favorite to win. Passing the leader is going to be incredibly difficult. Passing in the middle of the field would be a little bit easier, but passing the leader is going to be an absolute chore for anybody. So I don't love an outright pick like, hey, I think this guy's going to be the best guy, because I don't think that's how this race is going to go. With that said, there's a couple of guys that I do like if I'm going to pick in terms of speed and what we saw here in the All-Star race earlier this year, and that's going to be Kyle Busch at plus 900. And then Ross Chastain, who's plus 1,000. So it looks like, yeah, yours is actually in flipped order from what I have on the app. So I was looking for Chastain. He's right underneath Kyle Busch on mine. But essentially with Kyle Busch, we got a driver that won here in 2020. Seems to be really, really good at this track. And if we're pegging the Toyotas to be the fastest group again, then it's him versus Denny Hamlin versus Christopher Bell. And then realistically, the only other threat is Bubba Wallace. So he's one of about 4 guys in that Toyota camp that we feel like can truly win right now. Martin Truex is a step off those guys and has been pretty much all year for the most part. But Kyle Busch strikes me as a driver that can win this race. And if Toyota does have the advantage, he'll be one of 4 guys that I think are at the top of that list. So I really like that we're getting plus 900 on him, whereas you see Bell's plus 700 and Hamlin's plus 550. And then Ross Chastain, was one of the few cars in the All-Star race that was moving forward. So when we had that race here, I believe it was the end of May, might have been early June, but essentially we had a weird qualifying where they used pit competition to set the first 8 drivers or whatever it was. It was just a weird setup. So, Kyle Busch got the pole for that race because he had the fastest pit crew in the pit competition, and then he led the first 47 laps until a tire blew. Essentially, no one was going to get in front of him on speed. They needed that tire to blow at that time. Well, Ross Chastain actually ran into the back of him when that happened and crashed out of the race and actually took out Chase Elliott as well, who's another driver I do like in this race. But basically, there's a big 3-car wreck there, and it took out 3, probably the top 5 cars in that race early on. Ross Chastain was one of the few that moved through the field. Chase Elliott also moved through the field in that race because they started further back, and they showed really, really good top 5 speed. Ross Chastain was probably the fastest car at Charlotte earlier this year, which is a decent comparable track. You go all the way back to Vegas, another 1.5-mile track, and he was the fastest car then as well, or at least in the top 3, and he was contending for the win. So we've seen it all year with Chastain on the 1.5-mile that he's been right there in the upper echelon. I do think Toyota superseded him, and I do believe that Hendrick has caught and kind of matched him. So he's just more of one of the top 8 guys, but you're getting about the 8th best number on him, if that makes sense. So I do like him. I think he's a contender. I think he's a guy that can win this race. And based off of what we saw for a short period of time in the All-Star race here at Texas and other 1.5 miles, he could come out and have the fastest car. So very interested to see how he looks.
Yeah, for sure. I don't mind that. And B-Man's mentioning that he thinks that Hamlin and Busch are swapping pit crews. Do you think that makes much of a difference in your breakdown?
So the reason they're doing that is because, they believe Kyle Busch's pit crew is faster. I mean, that's the only reason to make that move is, Hamlin's still in the playoffs going for a championship, whereas Kyle Busch is now eliminated. So they believe that's a better pit crew and that will help Denny Hamlin. To an extent, yes, that is an advantage. I believe for picking a race winner, though, I don't necessarily know if pit crews are going to matter. If both those guys are in the top 5 late and they're going up against each other, I think they'll come out in whatever position and order that they are. I don't think one pit crew being a couple of tenths of a second faster is necessarily going to make the difference. But I expect that we'll see 2-tire pit stops at that time, or maybe even some people gamble for no tires, and that's just going to shake things up anyway. So I'm not as worried about that pit crew situation as I might be at other tracks where we know that tires matter and we know that these guys are going to want to take 4 tires and then every single stop is going to be that. I think there's a chance that won't matter. And then at the end of the race, if Toyota are the fastest cars and they're both towards the front, it's really just going to be a battle of who after that last restart is in front of the other. I don't know if I'm going to put too much stock this week into the pit crew change. Now at Homestead, which is in 3 or 4 weeks, it's super vital because every single time they pit, they're coming for 4 tires. And if Hamlin can maintain position because he has a better pit crew or gain a couple spots, way more advantageous there. Whereas I feel like this week it's kind of a situation where you're going to see a weird, screwy final segment of the race anyways through pit stop strategy. And at that point, I get almost double the odds here, at plus 900 versus plus 550. So I just want the bigger number.
For sure. Don't blame me. All right. Hopefully that answers your question there, B-Man. But yeah, I know that you mentioned it's a spot where it's harder to pass, and for that reason, it's harder to really predict an underdog winner. But when I'm looking at the research, who has won it in the past for the Cup Series, you see Kyle Larson, you see Kyle Busch, see Austin Dillon. Do any of those names stick out this week, or is this really a tough one to grab that big plus money on someone just because you know that there's going to be harder to pass?
Well, so it's an impossibility to figure out who can upset at a high number, and that's where it's going to get tricky. You can pick your favorites. We can try to pick them based off of speed. So Daniel Suarez at plus 3,000 sticks out. I know he'll have a pretty good car. We saw, I believe, at Darlington, he drove. He started last, drove straight through the field and had a top 5 car. Another intermediate style track with higher banking, right? At Charlotte, probably the best comparable to Texas is Charlotte. At Charlotte, he had a top 5 car and looked great. So there's the shot that he has a top 5 car. They nail the final pit stop, and he's restarting with the lead late, right? The Austin Dillon win that you referred to is a great example of what Texas is. So in that race, I believe that was 2020.
Yep.
Tyler Reddick and Austin Dillon, who drive for RCR, basically used pit strategy. And what it was is everyone came down pit road. I believe every single team took 4 tires except for them. Austin Dillon, I believe, took no tires, and Tyler Reddick took 2. And basically, all these teams have hubs. Well, RCR, who's the ownership, the team that they race for, they have a hub that basically calculated how long those pit stops would take and where they would come out as a result. And when they did that, that's why Tyler Reddick got to take 2 and Austin took no tires, or however that shook out. Well, Austin Dillon then went on to lead the last 30 or 40 laps at a very significant tire disadvantage, or at least you would think. But because it's so incredibly hard to pass there, and because there's not a ton of tire fall off, he was able to lead and win that race when he was realistically probably a 13th or 15th place car. So that gives all these drivers like Suarez, maybe even Alex Bowman, but Austin Cindric, Briscoe, Austin Dillon, any driver like that that can run top 15 and be in that group can flip this race and steal a win essentially because of a pit strategy call. And that's where it gets really difficult to project. If you scroll down a little bit and look at all the 10,000 drivers, which starts at Buescher, and there's a litany of them, but like Ricky Stenhouse stands out as a guy, even higher number. But Eric Jones, Ty Gibbs, Austin Dillon, all these guys are drivers that I expect to run top 15. Maybe it's 12th or 15th. And if they can find a way to cycle themselves to the front, they can stay up there. It's not a matter of the faster cars going to pass them. It doesn't work like that. So if you want to take some long shots, it's not a bad idea to look at drivers like Ricky Stenhouse, who has 3 or 4 top 10s on mile-and-a-half tracks this year at plus 25,000. You can put $1 on it for shits and giggles, and if it hits, you're gonna win a decent little bit of money. So it's not super predictable is the issue. But all these guys technically have a chance. Now, at the end of this race, we may just be looking at Denny Hamlin leading, right? Like that's very plausible. But there's a lot of scenarios that can play out for any random number of drivers to hit.
All right. Okay, well, looking at that, I know it's harder to pass, but let's shift on. If you don't want to be able to predict a race winner, how are these top 5, top 10, top 3 finishes looking for you as well?
Yeah, so I'm high in Kyle Busch already, but getting him at plus money there for top 5, I really, really like. So, plus 110, I do believe Toyota is going to have a slight advantage. I do. I think Larson, Elliott, Chastain, Byron, and Bowman, too, are going to have fast cars. But for me, Kyle Busch is a consistent top 5 threat. It's not, when I'm playing Bowman, I'm playing someone who I think theoretically can get a top 5, so it's a good number. But Kyle Busch consistently is contending for top 5s every single week, right? Like that's what he does. He's a phenomenal elite tier race car driver. And I believe the Toyotas will have the slight advantage on speed. The Gibbs pit crews across the board are the best. So Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, all those guys towards the back end of the year are faster than everyone else on pit road. There were some issues early in the year with Bell's crew and some other ones, but right now they're all just firing and they're just the best. Like they're almost untouchable on pit road. So he'll have an advantage there. They're overall in a much better position to score top 5 than I think Larson is. And I just like the plus number for a driver who I feel really good about potentially finishing top 5. And then someone like Bubba Wallace at plus 250, if the Toyotas are that strong, he won at Kansas because they were that strong. There's a very good possibility that he can win here or even finish top 5. But plus 250 for top 5 is a pretty good number on a driver who we've seen contend for a lot of top 5s over the last couple months. I don't know what the results are after last week, but going into last week, he had the best average finish over the last 10 races, which was about 10th place finish in the entire series. So Bubba Wallace definitely stood out there as a driver who I think can finish top 5. And as a result of the bigger number there, I like playing a little bit on that.
For sure. And shifting over to that top 10, I know it's a wider lines. We don't really like to see those wide lines, but for someone who's, theoretically one of those cars in that with a situation where you can't pass as much, do you think that any of these guys in plus money have a good opportunity to make the top 10, or is it a market you're staying away from?
Yeah, so I like a few guys. So Bowman and Suarez, they're minus 110 and plus 100, I believe. Those guys both stand out as ones that I would peg to finish top 10. Bowman's always really solid on mile and a halves. He looked great at Kansas. It was, I think, him and Byron were both running top 5 most of that race towards the end. So, Bowman would not shock me if he ran top 5 and our top 10. And then obviously I mentioned Suarez a little bit ago, being a potential sneaky race winner at plus 3,000. Well, obviously a top 10 is very likely if that speed's still there from the other mile and a half intermediates. So I like Suarez at that number. Ty Gibbs stands out as well. We're talking about Toyota cars being fast. So, Ty Gibbs is going to be a good pick for that. And he gets a really good number there at plus 300. Eric Jones, who's recently won at Darlington, who has been a top 10 or top 15 car in almost every high banked, high speed track, dating all the way back to California when he finished third. So those are bigger number guys like Gibbs and Jones that I really like on speed that I think can finish top 10, not on strategy, but on pure speed and execution that I think can get the job done. So I prefer to attack those drivers more than saying, oh, I think Austin Dillon theoretically can do it with a pit call.
All right. Okay, let's move on, though. I like those spots there. I will be making sure to tail you on those and see if this race goes down. But let's talk about some of these specials. And I know we like to talk about group winners and, I'm in the wrong spot, and matchups. Any of these matchups stand out to you? I know you see a couple spot where there are some plus money guys, and I know you like to target those. In a race like this that you see a lot of, people keeping the lead, is there anybody here you're targeting, or is it a pretty well-aligned market?
It's pretty well done. I think the issue with this race and this track is that any of these things can happen. And not because of speed, but because of the track itself lends itself to, oh, Logano got ahead of Bubba Wallace, so now he's just going to finish ahead of him, right? I do have Bubba Wallace plus 105 over Logano as one of my plays here because it's plus money. You're getting head-to-head there. His recent form, like I said, best in the series in terms of average finish over the previous 10 races heading into Bristol. He had a power steering issue at Bristol, so nothing of his own doing there for a poor run. But he's just been super, super solid every week. He's running in the top 5, whereas the Fords over the course of this whole year have struggled on the mile and halves. The thing that's got people on some of the Penske drivers this week is because of the All-Star race. Ryan Blaney won the All-Star race here at Texas. Cindric won a stage. I believe Logano maybe even won a stage there. Basically, when Kyle Larson spun or had a tire go down and crashed out, and Chastain, Kyle Busch, and Chase Elliott crashed out, there wasn't as many elite drivers to contend with. And Penske was able to use the strategy really well to keep their drivers out front, right? I don't think they'll have that luxury this week. I think they'll be running in that 7th to 15th range. And speed-wise, that'll make them vulnerable. Like Bubba Wallace can be 12th and pass Logano for 11th. That's totally possible. It's just when they get further to the front, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, that it gets harder and harder and harder to pass. So, anyways, I just like Bubba getting plus money. I think he's had the faster car. He's been better over the last couple months than any of the 4 drivers for the most part, other than probably Harvick. So I just feel like that's a really, really good spot. And then the other one, Ross Chastain minus 110 versus Truex. I obviously alluded to what I think of Chastain this week. I think he has race winning upside. Truex just hasn't shown that. He hasn't really even been a top 5 consistent guy. I don't have a stats pulled up, but he probably has 4 top 5s all year. And whereas Ross Chastain has about 15. And so there's just a stark contrast in their speed and overall ability with this new car this year. And I feel like getting Chastain, who looked amazing here earlier this year and has looked amazing at other mile and halves, is just a positive play. I think he's far more likely to beat Truex and vice versa. And to get that at exactly even money to me makes no sense. I like that line.
All right. That is noted for sure. Last but not least, from the betting side of things, look at these group winners here. You got some decent plus money on either side. Any of these from the 4 groups stick out to you? I know we talked about Bowman, Suarez, and Wallace all in the bottom here, but or anything else here? Is anything sticking out?
It's tough. I think, Group D, I can make a case for Wallace, Bowman, or Suarez. So I don't really like attacking anyone there. because I can see any of them finishing towards the front and beating the others. They're all kind of in a group. I think Bubba Wallace being the favorite in that group makes a lot of sense because that's what I would have. And I don't think you're getting a good enough number on the other ones. I think that's price perfect. The only one that I'm interested in, and it's more of a risky one, but it's because what you're getting is Tyler Reddick at plus 450 in Group B. I love Bell. I think Bell beats him, I'll be honest. And I do think Chastain beats him. But I think Blaney being plus 260 is wrong. I think he should be the plus 450 guy in this range. I don't think the speed that he got very lucky in the All-Star race. He got super lucky, and I don't think he's got that race winning speed this week. Tyler Reddick won the Xfinity race here at Texas earlier this year in the 48 car. That is a 15th place car nearly every week, and he somehow managed to win in that car, right? At least I believe it was Texas. I need to re-verify that. But, he won a race here at Texas. He's really, really good at this racetrack. And, when we're watching the All-Star Open earlier this year, we all sat there and said, well, Tyler Reddick's going to destroy him because he was fast in practice. He looked great. And he had to drive through the field. He basically, I don't remember what it was, but he started last in that race at some point and drove back up to second. Like he was the guy. He just couldn't get past the leader because nobody can get past the leader. And then he ended up wrecking out because he was pushing too hard. His speed and his upside is a race win here. It's not just, oh, he's going to have a good finish. It's literally winning this race. And plus 450 when he needs to beat three guys, one of which is Ross Chastain, who can be a bit up and down, crash happy, make mistakes, mistake prone guy. Blaney, who I don't think will have the speed. It's really kind of a situation where I think him versus Bell is a possible thing. Tyler Reddick's guy that qualifies amazingly well. I can see him qualifying on the pole here or qualifying the top three, and they just have maintained track position all race. Tyler Reddick's been great at Darlington in recent memory. Kansas was a strong race for him. He's just been good overall on this style of track, and I think he's a guy that can definitely win that group. And at plus 450, I want to kind of attack those odds.
Hey, you had me at plus 450 there. I like the breakdown on it, and hopefully it comes through for us. But let's go over to the DraftKings side of things. And I think you can add a lot of the things that you've been saying over to what we're playing on DraftKings this week. But as I bring this up, as I take my sweet old time, make sure to like the video down below, subscribe to the channel, and show some love to Ryan after the fact. He's not done spitting his facts here. But all right, let's get this going here.
Yeah,
we have ourselves.
Real quick, he did win here at Texas earlier this year. In the Xfinity race. So I just wanted to make sure I was right in what I was saying there. And then, if you look back at his Xfinity results before that, a couple of runner-up finishes at Texas still. And then, in the Cup Series, he's been strong as well. He showed great speed. So I just feel like that's a guy that can win that group. Anyways, move on. DFS. Favorite thing
I was going to say, man, if you have somebody like that who says his upside is a race win, is he going to be like a GPP play of yours at 9.4K?
Oh yeah, for sure. And like I said, so the way I wrote down my notes for this event was pretty simple. I literally put pole sitter as my number one play, and for people that don't play a lot of DFS or haven't really looked into slate, we got 334 laps for this race, which is a lot, which means we have a lot of dominator points to be had, and there's probably a 90% chance the pole sitter ends up with 20 or 25 dominator points in this race. And that's even if they just kind of fall back halfway through the race and finish seventh or something, right? They're going to have those points in the bag from the race start because no one's going to pass them. I would say there's a legit 85-90% chance that they just hold the lead for whatever the first run is, and maybe 40 laps and maybe 60 laps until they decide they have to make that first pit stop. And because of that, I want the pole sitter in my lineups. I'm going to be playing a lot of the pole sitter, maybe not lock them in. I don't know how many lineups people play, but if I play 20 lineups, I'm a legit 65% type situation on the pole sitter alone. Tyler Reddick's definitely going to be in that conversation. But I think the most important thing is to get some dominator points early, and the pricing is extremely soft. So you're going to be able to afford three of these high-end guys, kind of however you want. And if we're focusing on guys like Reddick or looking into them like Reddick, Chastain's a great play, I believe, at 9,200. you're going to be able to do pretty much whatever you want roster construction wise, because these guys are not expensive. So yeah, I definitely like Reddick. I think he's going to have big upside. Chastain is another guy, exact same price range, who I really like as well.
All right, I like the notion of these DFS plays. You think you have a high upside, and high upside is definitely the way you're going to win it here. I'm more of a GPP player than a cash player, so I like it when you mention these risky stuff to go big. So you said Reddick and Chastain. All right, in order to get those guys, 9.4K, you're going to need some plays down low. Who's our low end option this week?
So I got a few. I want to start at Alex Bowman, 84, 84K. And then we can also throw Suarez in there at 82. These are a couple guys we mentioned in the betting situation with top 10s, right? And that's exactly why we like them, or I like them in DFS, is because they are guys who I believe, and if you look at Kansas there with Bowman, he led 107 laps and finished fourth. That's our last intermediate. And then at Darlington, he finished 10th as well. Another intermediate. Obviously Darlington and Texas are very different. They're different tracks, but we've seen across all the higher banked intermediate tracks, the speed kind of correlates. Now the difference between running fourth and 10th is microscopic. So, you're situationally just, one little positive thing from getting you out front or running seventh all race. And it's super hard to pass a bunch of elite drivers when all of y'all have the same speed. But Bowman's there with a couple of top 10 runs here on a similar type of track. And I think he can do it again at 8,400. He's going to have fast lap upside. He's going to have even potential race leading upside. So I really like that play. If he can qualify anywhere from 13th to 17th range, he's going to be a really good DFS play for tournaments.
Awesome. See, tournaments. See, the way to my heart, Ryan. All right.
I don't play cash. I don't play cash. Okay, I don't believe in it.
Good.
So
I do for UFC, but I can get how this could be a volatile contest for
yeah.
cash.
And so UFC 100%. I mean, it gets into a lot of 2v2 sometimes with UFC that I don't like, but with NASCAR, it's like if you have to hit on a dominator to cash a cash lineup, you might as well try to hit a dominator in a tournament with a much bigger paying upside, right? So like if we believe we're going to have 4 or 5 dominators like last week that are going to be heavily owned, and it's like if you don't have Hamlin in your cash lineup and he's the guy that dominates, you're not going to cash. So what's the point? You might as well be chasing the big money, in my opinion. So that's the way I think. Now there's some races where I will sprinkle a little cash in because it's kind of obvious what the plays are. But yeah, cash in NASCAR can be tricky. Some people have been super successful. I'm just not hey, that was me. I'm just not super excited about it. It is super, speaking of that, it's super weird not to have an MMA contest to put out. I've been wanting to send a contest out all week and I don't have one to send out. But anyways, value plays.
All eyes on NASCAR, man.
No, dude, it's so crazy. So value plays, Bowman's not super cheap. Neither Suarez, but they're kind of that mid-tier stud. Round out your lineup with a good 50, 55-point score. So that's why I like those guys. Looking for salary savers, though, I'm really big into the Chevy camp. Throughout the year, Chevy as a whole has been faster than Ford, heads up. And, Toyota only has 6 cars in the field. Ty Gibbs is the only one under 8,500. So Ty Gibbs is going to stand out a little bit, but he's a rookie driver making only about his 10th start, I think, at this point. So he doesn't have a ton of experience. And while he's a good play, you can see the ups and downs, right? You can see the kind of ups and downs, and he qualifies fairly well. Now, if he qualifies in the 20s, I might give him a look, but having him qualify 16th and potentially finish 34th when I'm not getting a lot of top 10 upside is nerve-wracking for me, and he's still 7K. So I don't love him as much. Starting with the Chevy camp, is Austin Dillon at 7,300. It's still a little bit high, but I think Austin Dillon's another top 15 guy most weeks, 14th, 17th. Winning a Daytona is not a big deal, but lots of teen finishes, right? 14th, 11th, 10th, 10th, 10th. A lot of things like that in his race results. And that's kind of what I'm looking for here. If he can give us a little positive place differential equity, that's really good as well. And then, as you mentioned, or as we talked about earlier, he did win here at Texas due to pit strategy. His team's pretty aggressive in that nature, and they are a team that can take advantage of a 2-tire stop and getting him good track position. So that's one of those drivers that I think will be in striking distance of a top 10 if they pull the right strategy. So Austin Dillon's one that I like for tournaments as well. And then Ricky Stenhouse at 6,600 is going to be probably a pretty popular play as well, but another driver who has big upside. Obviously, you see if you'll leave it at the top there real quick, finishes a 33rd, 30th, 35th, shows you the downside of playing Ricky Stenhouse. That's the risk of playing a driver that crashes out a lot. At Kansas, he was running top 10, maybe. I think he was top 5 at Kansas for a section of that. He's got 15 fast laps there, which was really, really strong for anybody in that race. That's a guy that had 7% of the fast. Actually, it's probably 10% of the fast laps almost when you factor in cautions, 8, 9, 10%. So that's a really good number of fast laps. And even though he crashed out and didn't get the result, that was a top 10 car. If you scroll down to kind of the midsection of the year, we'll see a bunch of top 10s kind of in a row. Keep going just a little bit more past all the road courses here. And right there, perfect. So he finished second at Dover, and then Kansas and Dover back-to-back. He had 8th place finishes. Second at Dover, and then it was Kansas and what the hell was the other race? I don't know. Anyways, you see a second and eighth there. Those are races on higher banked intermediate style tracks. If you look at the Coke 600, which is Charlotte, it's a 7th place finish. So basically over the course of that summer stretch or that late spring summer stretch, he had multiple top 10s on this track type. Then we saw Kansas a couple of weeks ago where he was running top 10 speed-wise there. We're basically looking at a driver who can run top 10 this weekend. He'll have that speed, and it really comes down to execution and does he wreck. His issue throughout his whole career is he's been one of the highest crash-rated drivers in the series. Top 5 almost every year. He wrecks a lot. He gets himself in a lot of trouble. And so he can be hit or miss, but that's okay for tournaments because you're chasing the big score, right? And we know he can deliver that this week. So at 6,600, he's going to be a popular play and someone that I'm really high on as well.
All right. All plays, no fades. I like that here. Okay. Any last remarks you want to make before we close shop here? I know we have talked about a few of those riskier players. Is there anybody you're missing out on that lower option or?
Yeah. So I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna look for a deep salary saver here. At 5,900 and 5,700 is Noah Gragson and Justin Haley. So these are teammates at Colleague Racing, so they're going to have the exact same equipment, same setup for the most part, depending on how the drivers feel. And these are drivers who I believe theoretically are going to run 18th to 22nd for the most part. The good news, though, is I do believe they will be on the lead lap most of this race, if not all of the race. I don't think there'll be high-risk drivers to go a lot down. So that'll give them the opportunity, especially if we get a race like the All-Star race was, where we do get some tire failures and we do get some DNFs and we get some things play out, that these are drivers that under 6K can finish top 15. If you look at Noah Gregson's recent results, he was strong at Kansas with an 18th place finish. And, that doesn't seem like huge upside, but when you start 28th and finish 18th and you score 35 points at 6K or 6,100, that's a really, really good DFS score for the value. He's going to be hit or miss. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to be crash prone. But his upside is good. Justin Haley is the opposite of that. He's extremely safe. He doesn't make the mistakes, but his upside may be a little bit less currently. But, 12th last week, 19th at Kansas. So he finished one position behind his teammate there. 19th at Darlington, 18th at Watkins Glen. This is roughly where he runs almost every race, 21st, 17th, 19th, 20th. Like, you just see the results are all the same. So you're going to get a decent finish no matter what. Depending on where he starts will decide the DFS viability. If he starts 13th, you're not going to feel great about playing him. But if he starts 22nd or 25th, I know it's a driver that will probably run 18th. And then if he can get some good luck or some fortune, that could be 13th or 14th. And we can be looking at a guy that's scoring 40 points on DraftKings at 5,700. So those are guys I like looking at this point in the week. Obviously, once qualifying unfolds, we'll have a better feel of things. But I just feel like those drivers with those Chevy cars have the upside versus some of the Ford drivers who have looked really bad at times. But, man, honestly, I think it was Corey LaJoie in the All-Star Open who stayed out or took no tires and basically stayed up front for 20 laps. Anybody can flip this race and become a great play simply by using pit strategy. And Corey LaJoie is a driver with the 30th best car on the grid, and he was able to maintain the lead in the All-Star race for like 15 laps. And so it these are guys I like, but man, you can spread it around to a lot of guys in that range, and they all have the ability to hit.
All right. And when you got hair like Noah Gregson there, you can't really go wrong. Look at that flow
Oh,
there.
yeah, he's rocking
Anyway,
the mullet.
there you go, man. All power to him. But I think that really, oh, you again. I think that concludes our DFS portion of this as well. And with that, the video as a whole, I mean, we have ourselves an interesting race this weekend. All eyes will be turned to it from my perspective, as no UFC. We got this, we got NFL. That's the way I'm playing some lineups this weekend. So I really appreciate all your insight, you talking about it, and let the people know where they can find you and where you're putting out all your work this week.
Yeah, so Daily Fan Racing will have all the content. We only have 2 races this weekend, so a nice calm weekend. Xfinity on Saturday, Cup on Sunday, both from Texas. So that's exciting. You can find everything there at Daily Fan Racing. We're gonna have a huge weekend coming up with 4 races. F1 will return as well, which we cover. We can always throw some F1 into these videos too if you're feeling froggy. F1's getting kind of predictable because we know what's happening. But anyways, Daily Fan Racing, Twitter as well. Twitter at Larkin8. That's going to be where all my content's pretty much posted. I'll have a Mayo Media video out later. With Pat Mayo and those guys. I'll have that out later this week. Have the Twitter Spaces that's already posted. We did that last night. Lots of random free content out there, and then hopefully that draws you in to the paid stuff over at Daily Fan Racing.
Yeah, for sure, dude. I know it's really worth your while if you guys want to go sign up there. The link is down below. But that we're done breaking down this this nice little race we got going on this weekend. The Auto Trader EchoPark Automotive 500. Look at that, big words for me there. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate everybody for all the support in the recent videos. Make sure to hit the like button down below. Show some love to Ryan. And with that, guys, let's make some